In terms of metabolism, there are two phases that we need to look at. One is the absorptive phase, and it's kind of what it sounds like, where we are absorbing what we're eating. So during the absorptive phase, we're eating food, and that raises the levels of glucose in our bodies typically, because remember, any type of carbohydrate is going to be broken down very quickly into glucose. This triggers activity in the parasympathetic nervous system and leads the pancreas to secrete insulin. And we're going to see that this insulin release is really important, and it's a critical step in helping our bodies absorb nutrients and store nutrients for later use. So this allows glucose to be used by the body, and it also will store glucose in the liver and muscles as glycogen, and fat is stored in adipose cells as triglycerides. So it's basically taking the fats and the glucose from the meal we've just had and storing them in slightly different forms so that they can be used later. It's kind of like putting money in the bank when you get paid. So if you only get paid, once a week, you don't want to spend it all at once. You don't necessarily want to carry it around. You want to kind of store it in the bank perhaps, and then make withdrawals as needed. And that's kind of what your body's trying to do here. Now, as the hours since our meal start increasing, we start entering this fasting phase, and glucose levels will drop during this time. That is going to trigger activity in the sympathetic nervous system. Now, this is, remember, our fight or flight system. And so this is going to energize us. It's going to motivate us to get up and maybe go find some food. And we've all probably experienced this, where if we're really hungry, it's hard to sleep, that kind of thing. So this sympathetic activation sort of energizes and arouses us a little bit. It also involves the pancreas, but this time to secrete glucagon. And so this hormone, glucagon, will transform the glycogen that was stored earlier into glucose that the brain can use for energy now. So the brain here gets prioritized. Why? There's not an abundance of glucose available, so the rest of the body is going to stop using glucose for energy, but the brain will still be able to use glucose for energy. It gets priority, and the brain needs glucose for energy, so it's going to be able to do that. Now, the fat that was stored earlier, well, now it gets released as fatty acids for the body and as glycerol for the brain after conversion to glucose. So the whole system is about storing the glucose and fats during the meal, and then taking them out and using them later on, hours after the meal while we're fasting. And here we can see sort of this cycle. When there's low blood glucose level, low blood sugar, the pancreas kick in. They're going to release the glucagon, and that glucagon is going to take that glucose that's been stored earlier and bring it into the blood and regulate glucose levels. So this is what happens in individuals who do not have diabetes, right? Glucose is tightly regulated, and glucose levels in the blood are kept pretty consistent throughout the day. Likewise, after a meal, when there's a high amount of glucose, the pancreas then are instructed to release insulin. Insulin gets released, and it will take the fat cells and allow the fat cells to store glucose from the blood, and reducing the amount of glucose in the blood back to safe levels. So in both cases, whether we're fasting or whether we've eaten, the level of glucose is tightly regulated and maintained at this safe level. And also, good thing to remember, insulin is the hormone involved in storing glucose, right? So during the absorptive phase. And then glucagon is the hormone that's released during the fasting phase. Why? Because your glucose got gone. So maybe try and remember it that way. Glucagon. All my glucose is gone, so I'm hungry, and the glucagon then is going to come to the rescue.